They say the fog in these valleys doesn't settle over the hills by accident. It moves with purpose, wrapping itself around the ancient stones and crooked trees, veiling the world in a silver-grey mist that even the boldest of wanderers dare not cross. In that place, caught between dream and waking, stands a cottage older than the oldest trees, a patchwork of stones and shadows tangled in ivy. Few remember who first told the tale of Sybilla, the witch who dwells within. But everyone remembers the warning. It is whispered that she holds a key, a golden key that glints like the last ray of the setting sun, impossibly bright in that land of mist and shade. This key, they say, unlocks a door not meant for human eyes or hands, a door that leads beyond the familiar, past the edges of maps, into a world that defies understanding. But this is no simple tale of magic and mystery. For those who seek the witch and her golden key may find themselves drawn into a web of riddles and secrets, a test of wit and courage that only the rarest souls can pass. And for all the yearning that key inspires, few have dared claim it, for few are foolish enough to gamble with the witch. Still, there is always someone with a heart too daring, a curiosity too fierce. And so it was, on an autumn night as crisp as bitten apples and ripe with the scent of falling leaves, that a stranger came to Sybilla's door. His name was Elias, though his name mattered little in the shadow of the valley. What mattered was the fire that burned within him, a longing for something beyond the edge of reason, beyond the walls of his small, predictable life. Elias had heard the stories of the witch, of her golden key, and of the door that led to another world. They were the stuff of legends, bedtime tales woven to entertain restless children. But in Elias, they sparked something more. A yearning that took root in his bones, whispering to him even in dreams. And so, despite the warnings that echoed like half-forgotten memories, he followed the winding paths into the valley. His steps softened by the mist, but certain in their purpose. As he drew nearer to the cottage, he saw the faintest glow through the fog, a flickering light that danced like a lone star against the darkness. The cottage rose from the mist, its stones worn by time, its roof sagging under the weight of countless winters. But Elias noticed none of this, for his gaze was fixed on the woman who stood at the door. Sybilla was neither young nor old, her face an enigma of shadows and secrets. Her eyes, dark as the depths of midnight, held a piercing intelligence, a knowing that seemed to unravel the threads of Elias's thoughts before he could speak them. She held a lantern, its dim flame casting an eerie glow, and in her other hand she clutched the golden key, a key so radiant it seemed to burn with its own light. For a moment, the two stood in silence, the mist swirling around them, binding them in a fragile, breathless moment. Elias felt a thrill of fear, a prickling at the back of his neck, as if the very air had turned watchful. But he held his gaze steady, refusing to falter under the witch's sharp scrutiny. "You seek the key," Sybilla finally murmured, her voice soft as the fog itself, wrapping around him like a question he hadn't yet thought to ask. "Yes," Elias replied, his voice steady though his heart beat like a wild drum. "I seek the door it opens. I seek whatever lies beyond." A glint of amusement sparked in her dark eyes, though her face remained unreadable. What lies beyond is not for the faint of heart, nor is it for those who prize the comfort of certainty. For in that world, the very air is woven with riddles, and each step will test your mettle. Do you understand, wanderer? Elias swallowed, but his resolve did not waver. He nodded, a small, solemn gesture that carried all the weight of his unspoken hopes. "I understand." Sybilla raised the key, letting its golden light fall across his face, casting a soft, unearthly glow that seemed to dissolve the mist around them. "Very well," she said, her voice a whisper, a warning, and a promise all at once. "You may enter, but heed this. Should you wish to return, you must solve the riddles that bind you to the other side. Fail, and you shall remain there, a wanderer lost to memory." With those words, she extended the key toward him, a silent invitation heavy with consequence. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the cool, hard metal against his palm, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath with him. And then, as if the fog itself had opened a path, the witch stepped aside, and Elias found himself before the door, simple, unadorned, yet humming with a strange energy that thrummed beneath his fingertips. It was a portal, not only to another world, but to all the mysteries and perils he'd only ever dared dream of. With one last look at the witch, he turned the key, and the door swung open with a whisper of possibility. Beyond it lay a world waiting to be discovered, and for Elias, there was no turning back. The door creaked open, a sound that seemed to echo through the fog-bound valley, soft yet endless. It was as if the very air recognized the ancient, silent power held by the witch's door. Elias stepped forward, feeling a chill creep over him, not from the cool autumn night, but from something deeper. An awareness that he had crossed the threshold into a place where the ordinary laws of reality no longer held sway. The world beyond the door was draped in an unnatural twilight, a soft, silvery glow that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Shadows danced around him, their shapes twisting like smoke, and he felt a curious weightlessness, as though he were not entirely bound to the ground beneath his feet. Here, the sky was a soft, glowing lavender, and the stars above were sharp and clear, each one a pinprick of mystery against the boundless expanse. He looked back, half expecting the door to have disappeared, to have left him stranded in this strange land. But there it stood, closed and waiting, with Sybilla's silhouette still visible, her eyes dark and watchful even from a distance. She did not move, nor did she offer him any farewell. He felt her presence linger, as though her gaze itself was a barrier between him and his old life. Taking a breath, Elias looked away and began to move forward. As he stepped away from the door, he felt the land come alive around him, shifting and sighing as if in welcome. The path ahead was barely visible, just a narrow trail of pale stones weaving through the silvery grass. And as he walked, the mist parted before him, revealing the secrets of this strange world little by little. It was then he noticed the creatures. First, a fox, silent and still as a statue, standing upon a nearby rock. Its fur gleamed with a strange ethereal light, as though dusted with stardust. Its eyes, sharp and glimmering, met his own, and he could feel its gaze penetrating him, sifting through his thoughts as easily as one might sift sand through fingers. The fox tilted its head, and a faint glint of humour flickered in its eyes before it turned and vanished into the mist, leaving only a faint whisper in its wake. "You seek the truth, wanderer, but truth here is no simple thing," the voice murmured, lingering in his mind even after the fox had disappeared. Elias shivered, for the voice was neither kind nor cruel, merely curious, a whisper from something that existed outside the bounds of time and place. But he pushed forward, each step carrying him deeper into this strange realm, each breath filling him with a sense of wonder and unease. The landscape was an endless maze of silver trees with leaves that shone like polished glass. Rivers glided quietly through the forest, their waters dark and slow, reflecting the pale glow of the sky above. As he continued, he caught glimpses of creatures flitting through the trees, figures too swift and graceful to be human, their forms barely visible, like shadows cast by moonlight. He felt their eyes upon him, felt their interest and their suspicion. Then, in a small clearing, he came upon a great, gnarled tree. Its roots twisted and curled like ancient fingers, digging deep into the earth. At the foot of the tree sat an owl, its feathers marked with patterns like a night sky full of constellations. The owl's eyes were enormous, almost unnervingly so, and they held a wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond the stars themselves. Elias felt an urge to speak, to ask it a question, though he could hardly think of what to ask. But before he could find his words, the owl tilted its head, and in a voice rich and deep as the earth itself, it spoke. "What you seek lies not in sight but in insight. Do you understand, wanderer?" Elias felt a flicker of confusion, but he nodded, feeling a strange pull toward the owl's words, as though they resonated with something hidden deep within him. "I think I understand," he murmured, though he knew his understanding was only a shadow of what the owl meant. The owl blinked slowly, its gaze unyielding. "You are not the first to seek the key, nor the last. But remember this: answers here do not come freely. Each truth you find will cost you another, for knowledge is a binding force, as heavy as it is light." Elias felt a prickle of unease, but he nodded all the same. I accept that cost. The owl made a low, approving sound, then spread its vast, silent wings and soared into the air, vanishing into the mist without another word. Elias watched it go, feeling both lighter and somehow more burdened. He knew he had been given a warning, though its true meaning still eluded him, but he pressed on, following the trail as it wound deeper into the enchanted forest, past trees that seemed to whisper his name, past shadows that flickered just beyond sight. The door behind him was gone now, hidden by the fog and distance, and he realized that he was truly alone in this place, with only his courage and wits to guide him. And somewhere, hidden within the mystery of this realm, waited the riddles that would bind him, testing him as surely as the witch had promised. And as he walked, the mist parted once more, revealing a glistening pool ahead, as clear and still as glass. There, waiting by its edge, was the faint silhouette of the witch, her figure shimmering like a mirage, her eyes as dark and knowing as ever. For it was time for his first riddle. Elias moved cautiously toward the pool, where the witch's figure hovered like a phantom, half formed in the mist, her edges blurred, as if she were woven from the fog itself. Her eyes, dark and fathomless, observed him with a strange intensity, her gaze piercing as though it could unravel the thoughts hidden in the depths of his mind. He knelt by the edge of the pool, its waters clear yet impossibly deep. Looking into it felt like looking into another world, a place where reflections twisted into memories, and dreams floated like leaves upon the surface. For a moment, he thought he saw his own face, but changed, older, worn by secrets and years he had not yet lived. Do you understand, wanderer? The witch's voice was soft, an echo of wind over the water, yet it held an unmistakable power, the kind that hummed with the weight of ancient truths. Elias hesitated. I understand that I'm far from home, he replied, his voice barely a whisper, but I do not yet understand what you seek from me. The witch's gaze flickered with amusement, as if his answer pleased her. You are in a place where understanding is neither easy nor given. In this world, every step will lead you further from what you know and closer to what you do not. But remember, wanderer, the path you tread is bound by riddles, each one a knot in the thread of fate. With a gesture, she beckoned to the pool. The water rippled, then cleared, revealing an image of a vast forest, woven from silver and shadows. The trees reached high, their branches arching like cathedral spires, their leaves rustling with whispers Elias could almost understand. This is the realm beyond, she said, her voice low and resonant. Each creature here speaks a language of mystery and magic. You will encounter many, but only those with eyes open to both shadow and light will see clearly. With that, her image began to fade, but her voice lingered, carried on the mist. Your first riddle awaits you, but it is not of my making. This world itself will test you, wanderer. Listen well, and trust neither the silence nor the noise." And with those words she was gone, leaving only the pool's mirror-like surface, where his own reflection gazed back at him, solemn and wary. As he rose, the mist swirled around him, shifting and parting like curtains drawn back to reveal a stage. The forest stretched before him, endless and silent, waiting. He took a tentative step forward, feeling the ground soften beneath his boots, as though the land itself were alive and curious, watching his every move. The path twisted and turned, leading him deeper into a world that felt both familiar and strange, as if he were walking through a dream he could not remember. Shadows darted between the trees, and now and then he glimpsed faces, half seen, spectral, fading as soon as he tried to focus on them. Then, without warning, he came upon a fox, the same creature he had glimpsed upon entering this world. It sat poised on a rock, its silver-touched fur shimmering with an ethereal light, its eyes fixed on him with an intensity that sent a chill through his bones. This was no ordinary fox. In its gaze, he sensed something old and knowing, something that recognized him far beyond the simple fact of his presence. The fox opened its mouth, and in a voice rich with hidden wisdom, it spoke. "Tell me, wanderer, what is it that flies without wings and yet holds great weight?" Elias's mind raced. He had heard riddles before, had played with their twisted logic in his youth. But this was different. Here, the answer felt like it mattered in a way he couldn't fully understand, as though his very fate hung upon it. He thought of flight, of wings, of all that could soar through the sky. But the words "holds great weight" lingered, heavy as stone, and he felt an answer emerge from the depths of his thoughts, like something unearthed. "Time," he said, his voice a breath, almost unsure. The fox's eyes gleamed, a glint of satisfaction lighting their depths. It bowed its head, a gesture of respect or acknowledgement, and spoke again. "Well answered, wanderer, but the path ahead is twisted, and time is only one truth among many. Remember this, every answer binds you closer to this world." With that, the fox leapt from the rock, disappearing into the shadows as swiftly as it had come, leaving Elias alone once more. But something had changed. The air felt heavier, the silence deeper, as if each step were drawing him closer to a truth hidden at the heart of this strange realm. As he continued, he encountered more creatures. A pale, shimmering deer that watched him with sad, ancient eyes. A raven that cawed a question in a language he almost understood. And a winding stream that whispered secrets he could not yet decipher. Each one offered a riddle, a challenge of thought and courage, and each answer he found seemed to pull him further into the world's hidden layers, binding him as surely as the witch had promised. Finally, He arrived at a clearing bathed in moonlight, the air thick with the scent of night-blooming flowers. Here, in the center of the clearing, stood an ancient stone archway, carved with runes and symbols that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. He knew, without knowing how, that this was his next trial, the doorway that would lead him deeper still. Steeling himself, he stepped forward, feeling the weight of every riddle, every answer he had given, pressed down upon him. He was bound to this world now, in ways he could not yet understand, and as he approached the archway, he felt the presence of the witch once more, her unseen gaze a reminder of the promise she had made. Each answer would bind him, step by step, to this enchanted world. And in its depths lay secrets as vast as the night, waiting for those with hearts brave enough and foolish enough to seek them. The moonlight glowed pale and cold as Elias passed under the archway, its runes gleaming faintly as if alive. The forest opened up beyond it, revealing an ancient path lined with stones etched with symbols he could not read, their meanings lost to time. He sensed he was entering the heart of the witch's world now, a place where the very air hummed with ancient power, and the trees leaned in close, their branches twisted like the fingers of watchful guardians. As he walked, he felt a presence settle around him, heavy and expectant. Shadows flickered in his periphery, but every time he turned, they vanished like smoke. The silence was deep, almost suffocating, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves underfoot. And then, without warning, Sybilla appeared. She seemed to melt out of the mist, her form both solid and unreal, her dark eyes gleaming with the light of countless secrets. She held herself still, her gaze fixed on him, a faint, knowing smile playing at the edges of her mouth. "Wanderer," she intoned softly, her voice slipping through the silence like a blade. "You have walked far in search of answers, but know this, the questions will not cease until you yourself are bound by their weight." Elias swallowed, his throat dry. He nodded, his resolve hardening, for he understood now that this journey was as much a trial of his spirit as of his mind. Sybilla's eyes glinted, satisfied. "Then let us begin," she said, extending a hand toward him. In her palm lay 3 polished stones, each one bearing a symbol that seemed to pulse faintly in the moonlight. "These stones," she said, "will guide you should you answer true, but fail to understand their meaning. And they will bind you to this world, each answer an unbreakable thread in a web that will hold you fast." He reached for the first stone, its surface cool and smooth under his fingertips, the symbol upon it twisting into shapes that defied reason. The witch's voice echoed around him, soft and enigmatic, asking, "What is both hunter and prey, eternal yet fleeting?" The words struck him like the toll of a distant bell, deep and resonant. He closed his eyes, letting the question unfurl in his mind, reaching into the depths of his thoughts, searching for something just out of reach. His thoughts spun as he grappled with the paradox. A hunter and prey. Something that chases and is chased. Something fleeting, yet somehow eternal. Then, as though whispered by the trees themselves, the answer came to him. The moon, he said, his voice a murmur, yet steady. It chases the sun and is chased by night. It wanes and waxes, but always returns. Sybilla's eyes gleamed with approval, and she nodded, a faint smile ghosting across her face. Well answered, wanderer, she whispered, her tone tinged with something close to pride. She closed her fingers around the stone, and as she did, it shimmered and dissolved into mist, leaving a faint trace of silver dust in the air. She extended her hand again, revealing a second stone. Another question awaits, she murmured. Speak only if you are certain, for each answer shapes the path forward. Elias reached for the stone, feeling the weight of her words settle around him like a cloak. This stone was darker, etched with a symbol that seemed to shift under his gaze, always just out of focus. Sybilla's voice drifted toward him, softer this time, almost a whisper. What devours all, yet is never full? Elias's heart raced, the words sinking into him with the weight of ancient truths. He thought of hunger, of emptiness, of a force insatiable and unstoppable. Images flickered through his mind. Storms, fires, time itself, each devouring whatever lay in its path, yet none were quite right. Then he remembered the tales his grandmother had once told him, stories of the relentless, eternal march of time, devouring years and memories, erasing even the mightiest of empires until only dust remained. Time, he said at last, his voice barely a whisper. Sybilla's smile grew faintly, as though some hidden delight glimmered within her. She inclined her head, and the second stone, like the first, dissolved into a wisp of mist, leaving only the third and final stone resting in her hand. Are you prepared for the last? She asked, her tone more solemn, her eyes darker still. Elias nodded, though his pulse quickened, and he reached for the final stone. This one was warm, almost pulsing in his hand, and the symbol carved upon it was sharper, bolder, demanding his attention. Sybilla's voice was low, almost reverent, as she asked the last riddle. What can break without being touched, and binds without a single thread? The question hung in the air, and he felt its weight settle into his chest, heavy and unyielding. Images flashed in his mind, promises, oaths, things fragile yet powerful, invisible bonds that could hold or destroy without a single touch. A promise, he whispered, barely daring to breathe. It can break without being touched, and it binds without a single thread. For a moment, silence enveloped them, the forest holding its breath, and then the witch's face softened, and her eyes glittered with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You have answered well, wanderer," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, a note of finality in her tone. "But remember, each answer binds you closer to this place." The third stone dissolved in her hand, and with it, the path before him shimmered, fading into mist. But she did not disappear. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the shadows that lay beneath her eyes, the weight of countless ages written into the lines of her face. "You are no longer the same as you were when you first took the key," she said softly. "Each answer is a thread that tethers you here, and one day these bonds may grow so strong that they can never be broken." Elias felt the truth of her words settle within him, a cold understanding that even as he sought to return, a part of him was becoming part of this world, bound to its mysteries and its magic. He met her gaze, his heart heavy yet unafraid. "Then I accept the weight of these answers," he replied, his voice steady. "For I am bound by choice." Sybilla regarded him for a long moment, and then, with a final nod, she turned and vanished into the mist, leaving only her words echoing in the silent forest. Elias stood alone in the silence of the forest, the witch's final words drifting through his mind like smoke. Each riddle had bound him closer to this world, pulling him deeper into its mysteries until he could no longer tell where his heart began and this realm ended. He felt the weight of those answers, like invisible threads woven around him, each one a reminder that his journey was now tethered to the fabric of this land. Yet he knew it was time to return. Taking a breath, he turned to retrace his steps, only to find the forest altered, its familiar paths swallowed by shadows and mist. The trees loomed taller, their branches tangled together in ways that made it impossible to tell where one ended and another began. What had once been a trail now twisted in unnatural directions, and every step he took seemed to lead him deeper into a place both beautiful and haunting. With each step, the mist thickened, swirling around him in ghostly shapes, almost as if it were trying to stop him. The path seemed to fold in on itself, spiraling in impossible loops, and he realized with a slow, dawning horror that the way out was no longer a simple matter of turning back. The air grew heavy, and the world around him began to whisper, voices hidden within the rustling leaves and the murmur of unseen streams. They spoke in half-formed words and broken thoughts, calling his name as if testing its shape, as if his very identity was something fragile, malleable in the grasp of this place. In his pocket, he still held a small shard of one of the stones he had touched, a faint reminder of the riddles he had answered. He clutched it, letting its cold surface ground him, reminding him of his purpose. His heart beat steady, defiant, a beacon of resolve in a place that seemed to devour all certainty. As he continued, the voices grew louder, and soon he found himself facing shadows that gathered in the shapes of familiar faces. faces of people he had known, people from the world he was trying to return to. They flickered in the mist, their eyes vacant yet piercing, as though they too were bound to this place, caught between realms. "Why do you leave?" one of them whispered. A voice that sounded like his mother's, yet hollowed and distant. "You are bound here, Elias. You belong." His steps faltered, the weight of the words pressing down on him, heavy and cold. For a brief moment, doubt seeped into his heart, curling around his thoughts like a creeping vine. Did he belong here now? Had the answers he had given already bound him, making his return impossible? But then he remembered Sybilla's warning, the reminder that while the path was twisted, it was not without end. The riddles had bound him, yes, but he had chosen to bear that weight. He had chosen the journey, and by that same choice, he would find his way home. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself and walked on, his gaze fixed ahead, refusing to look back at the shadows that followed him, refusing to listen to the whispers that tugged at his heart. And then, through the thick veil of mist, he saw it, the faint outline of the door, standing solitary and silent in a clearing of silver grass. Relief washed over him, and he quickened his pace, though the air grew denser with each step, as if the land itself were resisting his departure. The door loomed closer, its wooden surface aged and weathered, yet a sturdier stone. Sybilla was nowhere to be seen, but he felt her presence like a shadow cast across his path, watching, waiting. He remembered her words, that each answer was a thread, each choice a bond. And he wondered if leaving was truly as simple as turning the key. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle, the golden key cool in his grip. The moment he touched the door, a final question filled his mind, as if whispered by the witch herself. What will you carry with you, wanderer, and what will you leave behind? He closed his eyes, understanding now that this was the final riddle, the question that would determine what parts of him remained his own and what would forever belong to this world. Memories of his journey flickered through his mind. The fox's keen gaze, the owl's warning, the weight of each answer he had given. He knew he would carry those memories with him, but he also felt the need to release something of himself here, a part of his heart that would remain bound to this place as surely as a footprint in sand. When he opened his eyes, he whispered softly, "I will leave behind my fear and carry only what I've learned." With those words, he turned the key. The door swung open, revealing the valley beyond, draped in quiet moonlight, the fog still lingering in soft curls over the hills. He stepped through, feeling an invisible weight lift from his shoulders, though a faint thread still seemed to tug at his heart, a reminder of the world he had left behind. The door closed behind him, sealing with a silence as deep as the night, and when he looked back, it was gone, swallowed by the mist. Only the whisper of the wind remained, carrying a faint, familiar voice that seemed to echo from the depths of memory. Remember, wanderer, the riddles bind you still. Elias took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs, grounding him back in the world he knew. Yet, as he turned to make his way down the valley, he felt a flicker of something strange, a sense that a piece of him would forever walk in that other world, a part of him bound to its mysteries and shadows. And as he returned home, his steps sure and steady, he knew he had left something behind, yet carried with him a secret knowledge, a memory woven from the fabric of magic and mystery, bound forever to his soul.